So Kyla, do you want to take over and talk a minute about, not so much about how they do the Q&A because they're not all in yet, but just a little bit about Earth Month and what we're doing?
Yeah, so we at the City of Tacoma, we do run these webinars through the EnviroHouse pretty regularly on different topics, but we're doing a special series for Earth Month this month, April. So we have a bunch of different Earth Month events going on, and each week of the month has a special theme. This week's theme is waste prevention, which is why we are going to talk about conscious consumerism and why we've invited Krystina to present today. Talk a little bit about what we can each do individually to prevent waste, and sort of the broader, what can we do as a society and as a culture to move past our waste issues. So we're going to talk about that today, but we also have some more upcoming events. So next week is going to be Sustainable Fashion Week, and we'll have another workshop on sustainable fashion with some local fashion experts. So you can come to that workshop, and we'll have a really cool recycling event going on at the recycling center where you can take your textile waste, so old clothes, shoes, and linens, anything that's made out of fabric, you can take to the recycling center next Saturday. So not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. And then we'll close out Earth Month with a week on sustainable communities. So we'll have some other topics then too about what we all can do to improve our communities and things we can do together to support sustainability. So I'm going to just drop this link to the Tacoma Earth Month calendar in the chat if anyone wants to take a look at our other upcoming Earth Month events. But we're going to get started shortly with this webinar. As everyone is coming in, I'm just going to open this quick poll question so we can get a sense of how you found out about this workshop today. So how'd you end up here? This is our way of figuring out how we can reach you better too. So what's working, what's not working. We really appreciate your feedback on that. And I'll leave that up for a moment.
And you can answer as many as you want to.
And some of those come in, we've got quite a few answers. And then if you said other, if you found out about this some other way, if you want to drop your answer in the chat just so we know what, how you heard about us, that's super helpful too. I see one coming through. So from the Drop in the Ocean Facebook site, that's awesome. Drop in the Ocean, yep. Thanks, Christina.
Do we have the EnviroNews, how to sign up for the EnviroNews? Do we have that out there? So if people are not familiar with that, the EnviroNews listserv used to be run by the city, and then we ended up where the city supports it, but we have people from the Citizens for a Healthy Bay that manage it and run it. And you can, it's a listserv where they have job announcements, event announcements, places where you can volunteer. It's all sustainable related topics, education, all different kinds of opportunities. University of Washington Tacoma posts on there a lot. Women's groups, places where you can go, just learn a lot of different things. So that's a good resource along with the others if you aren't using that.
Yeah, we just had a question come in through the Q&A. Thanks for using the Q&A. We're going to use that throughout the presentation today if you have questions. But we are recording the webinar today so that it will be posted on YouTube later for those who couldn't attend. We have all of our EnviroHouse workshops recorded actually and available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to find out about past workshops that have happened, you can view them there, and this will be a resource to others as well.
And they're also on the EnviroHouse website, most of them. So cityoftacoma.org/workshops will get you to the upcoming webinars and the ones that have been recorded. And then we also have how-to videos that we've done, which are shorter videos, and those are on the YouTube channel, the city's channel. And that's the same link that I think Kyla put in. It's youtube.com/City of Tacoma /playlists. And you can get to it without the playlist, but then you're going to get everything like Urban Green and all the different city programs and channels. But you just look for the EnviroHouse playlists and you'll get both of those.
All right, so we've got quite a few attendants on now, and we're a few minutes in here, so we're going to get started very shortly. But just before we get started, I want to ask 2 questions, and this is because I am an AmeriCorps member, and I have to do some data reporting on our outreach efforts and how many new folks we're educating in environmental sphere. So I just have a quick 2 questions for you. First is, how much do you feel like you already know about sustainable consumer choices? And how easy do you feel like it is for you to make those choices? And we're going to come back to these questions again at the end and ask them again so we can see how much you've gained from this workshop, and that helps us, constantly improve our what we offer here at the city and our outreach. So it would be great if you can take just a minute to look at those, and then I'm going to introduce our speaker today. So we're joined today with Krystina from A Drop in the Ocean, and take it away.
Okay, hello. I will go ahead and share my screen right away, but hello to everybody that is here. Let's make this happen here. All right. Can we see my screen? Excellent. All right, so hello everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you to the city for inviting me. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. So this is kind of an outline for what we can expect today. We'll start with a brief introduction to me and to what I do, why I'm here, and then we'll move into the meat of the presentation, which is going to be how we can make a move to a circular economy, what that is, what kind of economy we're in right now, and the kinds of things that would need to change to make that happen. Then we'll talk about some small ways that we can all start to make a difference. And one of the things that I always say is small actions, big impact. There's a lot of really small things that we can do that have a pretty large impact. And then we'll talk a little bit about greenwashing and how we can spot ethical businesses, both like socially responsible and environmentally responsible. And if you have any questions, you can pop them in the Q&A, and Kyla will be monitoring those, and we will get to all of those at the end, but you can go ahead and pop them in at any time. So hello, if you don't know me, I'm Christina, and I am the founder and CEO of A Drop in the Ocean. It is a zero waste and sustainable living shop based out of Tacoma here. We are an online shop. We don't have a brick and mortar, but we are rooted in Tacoma and have a lot of love for Tacoma. I am a zoo girl turned zero waste wannabe. My whole life, I considered myself an environmentalist, but I had never really considered my trash or my waste or my personal impact on the planet until I found a BuzzFeed video where someone tried to go zero waste for 30 days. And for me, my understanding of conservation was that you had to have advanced degrees and you had to have a fancy job with conservation in the title, and you had to have a big travel budget so you can like travel to Africa and save elephants, right? That's what my conservation background was. And I was working at a zoo in the conservation department with that background. And when I discovered zero waste, it really kind of flipped my perspective of conservation and sustainability, because I realized that there are things that all of us can do every day that really have an impact on the planet around us. And it really kind of shifted the direction of my life at that point, honestly. I have a bachelor's degree in wildlife science and a master's in conservation biology. And a lot of my master's research really focused on how to communicate environmental issues and how we can get more people on board with living more sustainably and making sure that these changes are happening long term. So these are my three like core beliefs, like the things that drive me every day, the things that drive a drop in the ocean, and why I do what I do every day and why we do the things we do at a drop in the ocean. First, sustainable living should never be another task on your to-do list. I firmly believe that living sustainably should bring joy to your life, and it should be fun and exciting and colorful, and it shouldn't be difficult. And so that's really kind of what we focus on at A Drop in the Ocean, is making it as easy as possible and as fun as possible for people. And then, like I said earlier, I really believe that everyone can be a conservationist in their everyday life. There are these small things that we can do that really do have an impact. And finally, and really most importantly, one small action can have incredible ripple effects. And I will give you an example as to why I know this is true. When I first learned about zero waste and sustainability, I knew that I was going to be going to Chipotle the following Friday. My coworkers and I went to Chipotle every single Friday. And I knew that I was going to end up with a plastic fork at Chipotle. And so when Friday came around and I went to get ready for work, I grabbed a fork from my kitchen drawer and I threw it in my purse and I went to work. And then we go to Chipotle and we sit down to eat, and I pull this fork out of my purse and I just start eating. And I don't say anything. I don't draw attention to it. I just do my thing. And all of my coworkers look at me and they're like, Christina, why do you have a metal fork in your purse? That's weird. And I was like, oh, I saw this BuzzFeed video the other day about someone that tried to go zero waste for 30 days. And I decided that I kind of want to try to reduce my waste too. And that was it. That was the entire conversation. There wasn't any follow-up to it. And within the next week or two, everybody at that table was bringing their own fork. And eventually this moved to bringing straws and cups and napkins. And it was this really incredible moment for me, realizing that just me bringing a fork to Chipotle one day had this huge effect, because even if it's just one fork, that's 52 forks a year, essentially, multiplied by however many people went to Chipotle, right? That's really huge. And then because of that, when it came time to find gifts for the entire department for an appreciation week, we ended up buying travel utensil sets for everybody to have with them at all times, so that they could also start to reduce their waste in these really easy ways. So one little action really had these really massive effects. So let's get into kind of the meat of today. So we are currently living in a linear economy. And what that is sometimes referred to is a take, make, waste economy. Kyla, did you have a question or something?
Yeah, just real quick before we get into the meat too much, I just want to do one more question. It's just, we want to make sure we know what you all want to get out of this too, just so that Christina can tailor, her talk a little bit to what all you want to hear. So just take 1 second to answer this. What are you hoping to get out of a workshop today? And I'll share that with Christina so that she can keep that in mind as she's talking. So getting a lot of responses coming in.
Thank you, Kyla. I totally forgot.
All right. Looks like there's lots of interest in the simple tips and how we can change our consumer habits. Awesome. And, really all of them have some interest. So I'll share the results publicly for everyone to take a look at in a minute. We're just waiting on one more response, that last person. Okay, just gonna show these quickly. So definitely simple tips. Well, I think we'll cover all of these today. Yeah, and if there are any other things that you think of as we're going through, throw those in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we currently live in a linear economy, also referred to as a take, make, waste economy. You might have heard that phrase before. And this is a really simplified explanation of what this actually means, but it basically means that we are currently extracting resources from the earth, creating materials and products with those resources, and then throwing them away. That's kind of, the gist of it, right? And so it's really unsustainable because we can only get so many resources from the earth, and eventually we'll also run out of space if we just keep throwing things away. So something kind of needs to change here, right? So then you may say, well, what about recycling? Where does recycling fit into this? And we are basically in a recycling economy, which is kind of still a linear economy. And I have a really cool graphic a little bit later that will dig into that a little bit more. But in a recycling economy, we're still extracting resources, we're still creating materials and products, and then hopefully those things will be recycled like a couple times. There's a few things that can be recycled over and over again, but for the most part, things can be recycled a few times, and then they're still going to end up being disposed of. So we're really trying to move away from this linear system and into something that's a little bit more circular. It's also really important before we go any further to really take note that plastic isn't the villain in our story. Plastic was originally invented in the 1800s as an alternative to ivory in billiard balls. There was a billiard supplier that offered $10,000 to anyone that could come up with an alternative to ivory for their billiard balls. The original solution that came out of this wasn't actually great for billiard balls. It was a little bit too soft, but it was really good for things like combs. And so suddenly we had this new material that was really versatile, and we started creating all these other different versions of plastic, and that's how we ended up today. And, you know, there's so many medical advancements that couldn't have happened if it weren't for plastic. You know, the laptop that I'm on today is made out of plastic. There's a lot of good that plastic has actually done. So it's important to remember that plastic isn't the problem, even though it's kind of talked about in that way a lot. So how did we get to this problem? How did we get to this linear economy and this linear system where we're just throwing things away? Because it wasn't always like that. And I think that we often forget that it's fairly recent that this has happened. So in 1955, Life magazine published an article titled "Throwaway Living." And the picture that you see here is a picture that accompanied that article. And it's basically, you know, people standing in front of a trash can, throwing all these items up in the air, really excited about all of these products that they're throwing away. The gist of the article, and I quote, said, "No housewife need bother doing the dishes anymore." Okay. So this article really targeted women who were like really getting into the workforce, and it was during this time of like empowering women and just a really, really great time when a lot of changes were happening. And this article capitalized on it, because before this, disposability didn't make sense, right? Why would I buy something just to throw it away? That doesn't actually make logical sense. And so the plastics manufacturers were having a really hard time marketing these products, right? And they came out with this article, and this article is credited with creating the disposable society that we live in right now. Because suddenly we could just throw dishes away. We didn't have to wash them anymore. We had so much more time on our hands because we didn't have to wash dishes. We didn't have to do all this cleaning anymore. So it's really interesting to see how these things have shifted over time. I also like to think of it kind of as a love story. And this is a quote that from a woman that I absolutely adore. And she says, "Our trash tells a story about what we value." And it's so true, right? We have come to devalue so much of our possessions and so much of what's around us, right? But the things that we really value are the things that we're going to take care of and we're going to have for a really long time, and we're really going to treasure those things. And I saw an Amazon product review once from some dude that said, "It's sturdy enough to use again if I feel like it, but cheap enough that I can throw it away and buy more if I want." And so when I say that plastic isn't the villain, plastic isn't the problem, this is what I mean. Because no matter what that thing was, I don't remember what it was, no matter what that thing was that he was talking about, it still used resources. And this is our relationship with things now, right? It's like, well, I could use it again if I want to, or I can throw it away and just buy more. And so we really need to kind of get to the root of consumption and consumerism and really kind of take stock of the things that we value and how we're living in alignment with those values to create a more sustainable future. And this is a quote that I absolutely love. And to be honest, I don't remember who said it first because it's been mentioned so many times in the sustainability sphere. But it says, "If your sink was overflowing, you wouldn't first reach for a mop. you'd turn off the faucet. And it's the same thing with plastics and consumption, right? Ocean cleanups and beach cleanups are great. We need them, right? We need to clean up the mess that we have made. But at the same time, if we're not cutting off these things at the source and we're not making long-term changes, then we're just going to keep having to clean up the beaches and the oceans, right? And so it's about starting at the beginning, turning off the faucet, and making the changes that are going to last, down the stream. And again, it's really important to remember that all products use resources, no matter what those resources are, right? So sorry, my cat's making noises. When bag bans started to really become a thing, right? It was a really big deal, really exciting, and I fully support plastic bag bans, right? But the things that we didn't talk about were the alternatives and the impact of those alternatives. So a paper bag, for example, needs to be used 3 to 43 times in order to have the same carbon footprint as a single plastic bag, right? You have to reuse that bag over and over again to have the same or a less carbon footprint than a plastic bag. The only thing that paper really has going for it is that it's biodegradable and more of a renewable resource. A cotton tote needs to be used 131 times to have the same impact as a plastic bag. And an organic cotton tote needs to be used 20,000 times, right? And so again, if we go back to this, like putting value back into the things that we own, we probably already have a lot of bags at home. We don't necessarily need to go out and buy new ones. And we need to be mindful of the things that we're consuming and keep these things in mind, right? It's not just plastic. So it's complicated. And I put this in quotes because when I was in my master's program, we would regularly do like group presentations about different topics of sustainability. And at the end of every group presentation, it was always, in summary, it's complicated. And there was even a moment I remember we were doing a group presentation and somebody in the class actually said, hey, can we just like put a rule out now that nobody's going to end their presentation with, in summary, it's complicated, because that's just how sustainability is, right? But it's not supposed to be like overwhelming, right? It can be, but what I focus on and what we focus on at A Drop in the Ocean is taking these really big complex systems that have a lot of different pieces and a lot of different moving parts and breaking them down into their small pieces and saying, okay, this is one little piece of it. Here's the problems. Here's current solutions. Here's something that we can do. Okay. And the thing that I always say is it's about doing what you can, when you can, where you can. Because these are really complex systems and there's no silver bullet and there's no one way to be sustainable. And so we have to do what we can, when we can, where we can. And especially when we look at the world right now, right? Zero waste looked very different a year and a half ago than it does today. And we have to remember that and be gentle with ourselves, because personal sustainability is just as important as environmental sustainability. We need to make sure that we're making these changes in the long term and not just in the short term. So let's move into some of the things that we can do. So these are the 6 R's of zero waste. You may be familiar with the 5 R's. It's usually more referred to as the 5 R's, but I like to add a 6th. And so they're on an inverted pyramid, as you can see here, because we want to do the things that are at the top of the pyramid more than we want to do the things at the bottom of the pyramid. So the first one is rethink. We want to just rethink our consumption habits, rethink the way that things are happening, ask questions, be curious, notice what's happening. You know, this is just such an embedded way of life that a lot of the time we don't actually even notice it. You know, so if you have a moment where you're like, maybe I don't need this thing, you know, why are we doing something this way? Can it be done better? Does it have to be done this way? Why is it being done the way it currently is? Noticing is a really, really important first step. Then we move into refuse. And that's just refusing the things that you don't need. The example that I always give, although it's not totally relevant right now in the time of COVID, is when you go to a conference, you usually are given like a reusable bag with a water bottle because everybody wants to be sustainable, and like a pen and a notebook and a physical like what's the word I'm looking for? The like schedule of events for the conference, right? And it's this big bag. Everybody gets one. Nobody really wants one. And then you take it home and you put it in a closet and it sits in a closet for a year or two. And then eventually you go, oh, I'm so tired of moving this thing around, and you throw it away, right? But if we could just say, no, thanks, I don't need the bag. You suddenly don't have that bag and all of that stuff anymore. So just saying no to the things that we don't need. And it kind of goes back to that rethinking, right? We have to first notice these things in order to be able to refuse them. And then reduce is just reducing our consumption, right? The most sustainable thing is the thing that you didn't buy, right? And then reuse whatever you can, whether that's choosing a reusable fork when you go to Chipotle, or that's, choosing reusable towels instead of paper towels, or instead of throwing the thing away, like the guy on the Amazon review, keep the thing, wash it, reuse it, right? The more that we can reuse something, the more sustainable it's going to be. And then the last two are recycle and rot is compost. So these are going to be our last resorts. They're important. They're a really important piece of the puzzle, but we should really be focusing on all of these other things first before we move to recycling and composting, because those still have an impact. And the materials that were used to create the thing had an impact. So this is the graphic that I mentioned earlier. It's a really great graphic that really kind of shows what exactly a linear economy, a recycling economy, and a circular economy is. And this is the goal. A circular economy is really the goal that we're going for here. We want a system where we are no longer having to extract resources from our earth and we're no longer throwing things away, right? This is what we want. We want products that are designed with the end life in mind. And so then those materials can continually go back into the system over and over and over again. This is what we're aiming for. So here are some of my best practices to start reducing your waste or just living more sustainably in general. Number one, pick the low-hanging fruit. And what I mean by that is make the one-time swaps first. So these are the things that you only have to buy once and then you never have to think about them again. One of my favorite examples is dryer balls. They're a reusable wool ball. You usually get at least 3 of them, and they replace dryer sheets. So they soften your clothes, they reduce static, they actually even reduce your drying time. Instead of buying dryer sheets over and over and over and over and over and over and over again for the rest of our lives, we can buy a set of dryer balls and we never have to think about them again, right? Things like that. Those make it really easy to start on your journey. And then no zero-use items. The only thing worse than a single-use product is a zero-use product. So we want to replace things as we run out of them. It's really easy to fall into the trap of like, oh no, plastic is everywhere. I need to get rid of plastic, and then just like want to purge your life of it. I fell into that trap myself when I first started with a few things, but we don't want to do that. So if you still have half a bottle of shampoo in your shower, there's no need to get rid of that because it's in plastic and switch to something else, right? Use what you have first and then start to make swaps. For example, I have been living zero waste for about 4 years now, and I'm still using makeup that I had before I even learned about zero waste, right? There are more zero waste makeup companies, but I'm more focused on using up what I already have before making the switch. Next is just be curious, have fun with it, try new things, ask questions, get creative. Like I said, zero waste and sustainable living should be fun and exciting, right? I don't want it to be difficult for you. I want you to enjoy it, and I want you to make the journey your own, right? Because it is a journey, right? Even if we reached a circular economy, there's still going to be more that we can do, right? And so we don't want to burn ourselves out. We don't want to feel overwhelmed. And we have to remember that there's not one perfect solution, right? Like my journey over the last 4 years has changed dramatically, not only because the zero waste movement has grown and there are more options available to me, but because like my life has changed and my preferences have changed. And so the things that I did 4 years ago might not necessarily be the same things that I'm doing now, right? So just have fun with it, be creative with it. And then one of my favorite ways to get started, and this is what I always recommend to people, is calculate your ecological footprint. And this will help you figure out where you really should be focusing your efforts the most. The website here that I have, footprintcalculator.org, is the tool that I really like to use. I do it about once a year. And I have a blog post on my website. I think we can link to it in the chat, with what exactly that looks like what the process looked like for me this year, what my results were, and like how you can use the tool yourself and how to analyze your results and really figure out what pieces of your life are going to have the biggest impact if you start making changes, right? Just like really personalize it for yourself. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about recycling, and I'm going to try to keep it brief because recycling for me could be like a whole presentation in and of itself. So we'll keep it pretty simple. So we have basically been led to believe that recycling is like this perfect solution. And like I said, it is important and we need to do it, but we need to make sure that we're doing it right. That is the most important part, is make sure that we are recycling right. So quality over quantity. It's more important to recycle right than to recycle a lot. And I love that here in Tacoma, we have massive billboards that say empty, clean, and dry. It matters, right? Because it does. Because if recycling is contaminated, maybe it has like food products left on it, or it's wet, or it's not actually recyclable, but we put it in the recycling bin. That causes a lot of problems. That's contamination. It causes problems for the recycling stream. We used to send most of our recycling as a country and as most of the world to China. We basically put all of our recycling on a boat and shipped it over to China and said, you deal with it. But in 2018, China said, nope, we're done. We don't want your waste anymore. And who can blame them, right? Who wants to be the world's dumping grounds? And they said, we're not going to take any recycling over a 1% contamination rate. To put that in perspective, some of the best contamination rates in the country are around 3 to 5%. So it was essentially an all-out ban on recycling. And so it basically brought recycling to a screeching halt in a lot of places. And so we need to make sure that we are recycling right so that we can get our recycling into the proper systems and make sure that those materials aren't going to waste. The other thing to keep in mind is that the recycling symbol, that like chasing arrows symbol, doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. Most often you'll see it with a number inside of it, especially on plastics, and that tells you what kind of plastic it is. It doesn't actually tell you if it is recyclable. Some numbers are more recyclable than others, but there's a lot of factors that go into it, right? I've also seen, especially on things like milk cartons or juice cartons, you know, those like cardboard liquid containers. I have seen the recycling symbol and it says recyclable, and then in small words, where facilities exist. But those kinds of containers are basically unrecyclable everywhere because those facilities don't exist, because it's lots of different kinds of materials all mushed together to make them waterproof. And it takes a very specific kind of machine to separate all of those layers and make sure that they can be recycled. And not many places have that machine. So it's important to know what is recyclable where you live, because it varies a lot. Here in Tacoma, what we can recycle is going to be different than what's recyclable in Seattle. It's going to be different than what's recyclable in Portland. It's going to be different than what's recyclable basically anywhere. Everywhere is going to be different. So if you're in Tacoma, there's a lot of really great resources on the city's website. I just went on there the other day, and there's like this new interactive quiz where you can like drag and drop what goes where, and like so cool. And then you can build a park every time that you get something right. Highly recommend it. I learned a lot from it. Tons of really great resources on the city's website. But if you're not in Tacoma, these resources should exist still for wherever you live. Your city should have resources available on their website for what's recyclable and how to recycle it. I think that we have that information in the chat, or we can add it to the chat. And then I also have 2 blog posts on our website about how to recycle right no matter where you live. So it's not specific to Tacoma, but it's really valuable information to help everybody just recycle right so that we can make sure that we're getting more recycling into the stream. And then we need to make sure that we're being an activist too. And this can look like a lot of different things. So first, share knowledge and resources. When I first started going zero waste, I kind of went a little crazy with it. And I don't think that's really gone away. It started with just me like posting on Facebook all the time about the new things that I was trying. And like, here I am now doing this presentation, right? So I was so excited. I was just sharing it with everybody. I was having conversations. I was like, hey, I found this thing. I tried this. I did this. Here's a tip I learned. And again, those ripple effects really do matter. And then sharing resources. There's this thing called a sharing economy, which is super cool. It's basically the concept is that we share resources within our community. And so there's things like buy nothing groups. If you're in Tacoma, there's a lot of really great buy nothing groups, and they're like super, super local, like usually like a mile radius if you're in Tacoma proper. And you can just post things on there. Like I have gotten plants from my buy nothing group. I have gotten I think I got mason jars from my buy nothing group. I have gifted like a flat iron, like a hair flat iron. Like there's always just things that you can give and you can receive. And it's a really great way to also build community. In Tacoma, there's also a Tacoma tool library where, you know, if you don't need to go out and buy a tool for a job that you're only going to need it once, you can borrow it from the tool library. Things like this, right? So then we're not creating more products that we're just going to buy and hoard in our houses and then eventually get frustrated with and throw away, right? And then we want to ask businesses and representatives what they're doing with regards to sustainability. So, you know, you can ask your favorite businesses like, hey, what are you doing to minimize your plastic? Or what are you doing to minimize your carbon footprint? You know, these are really great ways to have conversations and continue to build community as well. And then also reaching out to your representatives and making sure that your voice is being heard for the changes that you want to see in your community and for our earth. So lots of different ways to do that as well. And then we also want to make sure that we're shouting out the good that's happening, right? It's important to hold businesses and representatives accountable, but it's also really important to shout out what somebody's doing really well, right? If you have a business that is like, hey, bring your reusable cup to fill your coffee instead of getting a disposable one, like, here's how you do it, you know, shout them out, share them on social media, give them that positive reinforcement, and it really will go a long way. And then other businesses will also want that positive reinforcement too. So make sure that you're calling out the good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about greenwashing. So if you're not familiar with the term greenwashing, it's essentially when a business spends more time and more money making you think that they are doing good for the earth than they are actually doing good for the earth. And sometimes it's really difficult to spot this because sometimes it's really well hidden. It takes a lot of work to kind of become more familiar with what greenwashing is and like how you can usually tell. So these are some of my favorite ways to spot greenwashing. So if a company is really doing something good for people or for the planet or for any good cause, they will want you to know about it. Okay, they are going to shout it from the rooftops. They will have, like, on their website, you will see everywhere, like, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, here's data to back it up, here's a report, here's our numbers. You know, they want you to know because they know that it is important. Okay, and they will be proud of it and they will shout it out. They will also be really transparent about where they can improve, right? So for example, a drop in the ocean. Most of our bulk products come in plastic gallon jugs, but it's a closed loop system. We can return the jugs and they're going to be refilled over and over again. Ideally, they wouldn't be plastic, but that's the system that we're operating in right now, right? So businesses that are really wanting to do good for people and for the planet will recognize the system flaws and where they can improve and where they hope to improve in the future as systems improve as well. They won't try to hide that from you. And then lastly, check for third-party certifications. These are really, really critical too, especially for larger businesses. So for things like bioplastics, which is a whole nother topic I could do someday, there's one third-party certification that's widely accepted, and that is the BPI certification. I forget what it's like, Bioplastic Products Institute or something like that. And that's really the only certification that something is actually compostable or biodegradable. There is actually no regulation around putting the term biodegradable or compostable or sustainable or eco-friendly. There's no regulations around that. And so if you have something that says that it is a compostable or biodegradable plastic, make sure that you check for that certification. There's also other business certifications. There's things like a B Corp, which encompasses so much about like socially responsible, environmentally responsible, just so many different pieces go into being a certified B Corp. There's a 1% for the planet certification. There's certified cruelty-free, there's certified vegan, all of these different certifications can really be telling. And I will say that, like I said, it's more important for larger companies because these certifications do cost money. And again, an example, at A Drop in the Ocean, we do donate at least 1% of our sales to ocean conservation, but we don't have the 1% for the planet certification because that certification costs quite a bit of money up front. And that is just not money that I have to spend right now. And we work directly with our ocean conservation partner. We have a very close relationship with them. And so all of the money goes directly to them. And we're very upfront about how much we're giving. In our weekly emails, we have tallies for how much we're donating at the end of every email. And then every quarter, we post on social media how much we're donating. And every year, we put together how much we donated that year. It's on our website. It's everywhere. We're very upfront about it. But we don't have the certification because it's just not a priority right now because we are such a small business. So keep that in mind as well. And then ultimately, trust your gut. If something feels like it's too good to be true or like it might be greenwashing, there's a good chance that it probably is. And it takes some time to kind of get that gut feeling. You have to kind of do some digging and get more familiar with greenwashing and some of the greenwashing efforts, but that's usually the best way to tell. And sometimes there have been things that I'm like, I don't know, I feel like that might be greenwashing. And then I dig into it and I dig into it and I dig into it, like looking for greenwashing. And then sometimes I can't, which is great, right? That's what you want. But just keep in mind, if something feels like it might be greenwashing, 9 times out of 10, it probably is. So closing thoughts for today. Again, do what you can, when you can, where you can, and don't have any guilt with that, right? Because like I said, personal sustainability is just as important as environmental sustainability. We are in this for the long haul. This is not going to get fixed overnight. And so there are a lot of things that are out of our control. Again, we're in a linear economy. We are not in a circular economy yet. And so we need to just focus on what we can do, what is in our control, and advocate for those better solutions and better systems moving forward. And don't try to do everything all at once. I definitely fell into this trap when I first started going zero waste. I thought that I was going to fit all of my trash into a mason jar overnight because that's what the zero waste movement looked like at the time. And it did not work, right? So just keep that in mind, what you can, when you can, where you can. And remember, what we're doing is really breaking the status quo, right? This is not the way that the masses are, right? We are changing the way that we want to see our economy function. And it's a little bit uncomfortable at first. The first time I tried to grocery shop with reusable produce bags, I felt very uncomfortable, but fake it till you make it. And now it's just habit, right? You'll get there. And that's everything that I've got today. So you can see my website, my Facebook, my Instagram information all on the website here. If you want to check that out, I have a blog with a lot of different resources in it. And I have a weekly email series, our Make Waves Mondays email series that covers a lot of different sustainability topics. Again, breaking them down into these small pieces, little bite-sized actionable pieces. And there's always a solution or an action component associated with it. I never want to just like throw a bunch of information at you and then ghost you. Right? There's always going to be an action component. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me directly. And then we can move into questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Christina. What a wealth of information. Thank you so much for sharing.
Me again.
Yeah. I just want to encourage folks, if you have questions or thoughts, to post those in the chat or post a question in the Q&A. But I have a few questions I will start with. Okay, actually one just came in, so we'll start with this one right now. Because of the pandemic, some stores still do not use reusable bags because they don't want to touch them. What do you do? And I think this was kind of what you're talking about with, like, you have to be personally sustainable as well. And right now we live in a crazy time, so you just have to do what you can.
Yes.
Maybe you can build on that.
Yeah, so there are some stores, so if we're talking about just like general shopping bags, right, like the reusable bags that we're all used to taking, there are some places that aren't quite allowing those yet. Having said that, what I have found is that a lot of the places that like say that you can't, if you like just hold the bag and fill it yourself, they'll let you, as long as it doesn't like touch their surface or they don't have to fill the bag for you, they'll still let you. Not a perfect, like none of this is going to be a perfect solution, right? Because there are no perfect solutions, but especially right now. The other option is to just put everything back in your cart, take it out to your car, and then put everything into bags. That's also a really great way. If you just forget your bags, like little pro tip here, if you forget your bags in your car or at home, instead of just allowing yourself just this once to take a disposable bag, if you put everything back in your cart and carry it out to your car and put it all in your car and then come home and take it all out of your car, I can pretty much guarantee you're never going to forget your bags again. That is one of my favorite tips, by the way, for remembering your bags. For things like bulk bags and produce bags, I have basically stopped using produce bags. I just put all of my produce directly in my cart or in my basket because I'm going to come home and wash it anyway. So that's not something that I've really focused on. Bulk bins, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't even like checked bulk bins in the last year. I just haven't even worried about it because I know that it's a really complex thing right now. So I just buy like the biggest packaged thing that I can in the most sustainable packaging that I can find it in, instead of trying to go to the bulk bins and use my own bags. Did that answer the question? Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I love the just put your items back in the cart or in your basket. I am the one who got my mom to start using her reusable bags, and I was so surprised. She called me and told me that she had started doing that when the stores stopped taking reusable bags, and I hadn't even thought of it yet. And I was like, oh wow, that's brilliant. Yeah, she must have seen someone else do it. And then she just had like a laundry basket in the back of her car that she put all of them into, so that she didn't even have to like fill all the bags, and she could just take the whole big bin in. So I think that's, there are ways to be creative, but also recognizing that, like, yeah, it's just, things are different right now. We do have to be more careful, and maybe now is not the time to be super hard on yourself about eliminating something like bags. There are all kinds of different ways that you can reduce your waste. So I think you have to balance with like what works for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, someone asked for your preference on replacing Ziploc bags and baggies. So, there's like Tupperware options and the new silicone bags that are coming out. What have you found works best for you? Or what have you seen out there as alternatives?
So I never really used a lot of Ziploc bags to begin with. So that wasn't something that was difficult for me to swap. I like to store my foods in either like glass, Pyrex Snapware. That is like my favorite thing ever. Or in mason jars. They both keep things fresh for like ever. For something a little bit more portable, I do have one of the silicone stasher bags that does work really well. I just don't use it very often because it's a replacement for a product that I didn't really use before zero waste anyway, but they do work really well and I do like them. And I like that I can just throw it in the dishwasher and easily wash it. Beeswax wraps, I always have a problem saying that, are also really good. I use those for like, if I have a bowl that is too big for a lid or something, I can use the wax wrap on it. Or for like cheese, like a block of cheese, when I like cut off a piece, I'll use the wax wrap on that. But my all-time favorite food storage things are Pyrex Snapware and mason jars, mostly mason jars.
Yeah, I think, the Ziploc bags thing, I feel like I haven't used a lot since I was in school, making packed lunches. It's been a while, but my partner takes a packed lunch to work every day. And so he started doing like a Tupperware container for his sandwich and a couple of other snacks that fit in there. And then also we have a lot of containers that we saved from food things. So like peanut butter jars and like the salsa containers and stuff. So we'll put our snacks into those kind of containers and reuse them as much as, and then we don't have to like buy new Tupperware. We just have this collection of repurposed Tupperware now. While we are on the subject of bags and bag alternatives, we had a question come in about doggy poop bags too, and if there's a more sustainable way to pick up and dispose of pet waste.
Okay, I will again try to keep this brief because it tends to fall under like the bioplastic conversation. I have a lot of thoughts about bioplastic. So I don't have a dog myself, so I can't speak firsthand. I have seen people that will use like newspaper. They'll just like get a lot of newspaper to pick it up and then like put it directly in the trash. I've seen that. If you're not like out on a walk, you can get one of those like pooper scooper things. And then again, just throw that in the trash. As far as like out and about dog poop bags that like everybody has, that's where you really want to look for that BPI certification. There is the #1 brand recommended on Amazon when you search eco-friendly dog poop bags is not actually biodegradable. I don't remember the name. I don't, I'm not going to like search for it right now, but I can tell you that the #1 result is not actually biodegradable. It is a bright green bag and it's like some very earthy name. But the only thing that they have in their description about what actually makes it sustainable is something about like their box is cardboard. So greenwashing, right? So make sure that you look for that third-party certification if you're looking for a bag for like when you're out on a walk or something like that. There's not going to be a perfect solution for that. There's a lot of like blogs and videos and things about like zero waste pets, but they all kind of say the same thing, like not really a great solution. Here's like a better solution. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about that. I think there are some products out there for like that might be useful in your own yard space too, where you like the scooper kind of things that you can get. The same with like using newspaper. If you're just going to immediately toss it, you're not out on a walk or something. But yeah, there's not much we can do about doggy poop bags other than hope that they use something that hopefully breaks down over time and isn't plastic forever. Yeah. Let's see. So got quite a few questions. I love so many great questions about different products and things like that. We did have a question. You shared the, in response to replacing single-use plastic bags, there is that, like everything has an impact, the paper bag, the cotton bag, and the organic cotton bag. And one person said they didn't expect the organic cotton bag to actually have a higher carbon footprint than a regular cotton bag. So you talk a little bit more about why that is?
So I would need to, so these are just like numbers that I've had in my head for like the last several years. I need to go back and like revisit the study again. I've read the study, but I don't remember all of the details right now. There's a really good NPR piece about it. But Organic cotton in general, I would say, is better for the planet than regular cotton, because cotton is a very water intensive crop and there's usually a lot of chemicals that are associated with it. Whereas organic cotton is going to use less water and less chemicals. But there's still like a lot that goes into it. I'm not going to try to like BS my way through an answer. I would need to go back and reread the study to refresh my memory. But those are the numbers that were in the study.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point too there. Like carbon footprint doesn't necessarily, it's not equivalent to its entire ecological footprint. So things like water usage and land use have a big impact too. And so there's lots of different ways of measuring these products. I would also just say that comparing a plastic single-use bag to a like cotton tote bag is never a great way to do an LCA, that life cycle assessment, because they are not equivalent products. Like one is intended to be reused, it's intended to be sturdy. You use your cotton bag for like going to the beach and whatever else, like, you know, you're not just using it between the grocery store and your car and your house. So I think it's just good also when you read these studies to be really critical of the way they are designed, because sometimes these numbers like don't necessarily reflect the real impact of a product, just because there's like so many different elements that go into coming up with a number like that. And I think that the reason why organic is more is that organic crops tend to use more land, and land use has a huge impact on carbon footprint. So, and this is probably changed some, and it would depend on, you know, who's growing the cotton, but in general, cotton crops or organic crops require more land because you're not using pesticides and fertilizers, and you have to grow more in order to get the same kind of yield. So that's one thing too. So if you're doing like a small, you know, it totally depends on the scale of the farm and all those things as well.
Yeah. And I will say, I don't think that I made this very clear in my presentation, but for me, those numbers really reflect like, we don't need to necessarily go out and buy a new bag if we can't get a plastic bag anymore. You know, again, most of us probably have a swag bag from a conference sitting around our house somewhere, right? So it's using what we already have rather than going out and buying something new if we don't have
to. Okay, we only have a couple minutes left here, but we had two more questions. One is about shopping local. You know, Amazon's super convenient, especially right now. What are other options for shopping locally? And this also is related to your most recent blog post about transportation of goods. So maybe you can touch on that a little bit. And then the last question was about disposable diapers. So if we have time, we can get to that one too.
Okay, so shopping locally. So first of all, super advocate for shopping locally, not just because I have a local business, but also like something I find really interesting is that when you shop with a like large company, only about, I think, $40 or so, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, out of every $100 stays within your local economy. But when you shop locally, it jumps up to about $68 for every $100. So more money stays within your local community, which has a lot of really great effects, not only for like the people in your community, but also like taxes and improving infrastructure and really investing back in your community. So outside of an environmental aspect, that's like, I think those are really fascinating numbers. But also, yes, my most recent blog post, I think is really interesting. I spent a lot of time on it, and I got really nerdy with it. Actually, like two of my recent blog posts. So go check them out if you're interested. But the impacts of online shopping versus in-person shopping are not necessarily what we think they are. So one of the things, to put this in perspective, the thing that sparked this blog post was people ask me a lot if we have a local pickup option, and we don't, because it's actually a more unsustainable way of getting products to you. If you are driving to a place to buy a thing and then driving back home, that's going to be more of an impact than like a delivery service that has like an optimized route to make sure it's getting to you in the most efficient way possible, or shipping where like USPS is already coming to your home every day, right? So there's not much of an additional impact in that regard. What exactly was the specific question about shopping locally? I want to make sure that I'm actually answering the question, not just like rambling.
What are your ideas or recommendations for shopping locally? Are there good resources for, I would just add actually for Tacoma, we have a map of Tacoma local businesses, and you can actually sort by minority owned, woman owned on the Tacoma Celebrate Tacoma page. It's a cool GIS map, so you can see all the different locations and filter them by what you're looking for. So that's a great resource locally. But yeah, I think, you know, if one other thing is if you're going to buy something on Amazon, sometimes you can just see like who the seller is if it's not Amazon, and just buy directly from their website instead, or look for alternatives close by first. But if you have any other resource ideas, I think that would be helpful.
If you're in Tacoma, there is a Facebook page. I think it's called Helping Small Business of Tacoma or something like that. That's been a really great resource. It just started at the beginning of COVID, and it's been a really great resource for people to find locally owned businesses. And so there's like, you can search in there and find previous posts, but you can also like ask them, like, hey, I'm looking for this thing or this service. And, you know, if you have something like, I want to support a woman-owned business, or I want to support a POC-owned business, like you can say that too. And usually somebody will hop in and give you a lot of recommendations. So if you're in Tacoma, that's a really great resource. If you're outside of Tacoma, there's usually other types of pages like that or groups like that to help you find small businesses.
All right, I know we were running just a minute over, but I just want to put this last poll question out there right before we close, so that we can get a sense of how much you feel like you've learned from this workshop. So how much do you feel like you know now about sustainable consumption and conscious consumer decisions? And how easy do you think now it would be for you to make these choices? And if you joined us late and you didn't answer the first round of questions, that's totally okay. You can answer them now. And I'm just leave that open. And we did have that last question about disposable diapers versus cloth and reusable diapers. And I would just say, like, I've seen a ton of new brands come out recently about cloth diapers. And I think that's really, I think it's coming back as like a trend. A lot of people are switching to doing cloth diapers again. But I don't know a whole lot about it.
I'm just gonna say I know zero about it because I don't have kids and I don't think about kids very much. So it's not a topic that I have had to look into personally. I do know Tiny Yellow Bungalow has a really great blog, and she's a mom and she's zero waste, and she has a zero waste shop too. I forget where she's based out of, but her blog has a lot of really good information for moms and for kids. And I think she has at least a couple on cloth diapering. So that's usually where I direct people that have kid questions. I direct them to her blog.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, going back to that, buying a disposable item versus the impact of buying like a new cloth item, maybe source some cloth diapers secondhand, and then, you know, that's reducing the impact overall as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kyla, I had, if I can find them, we had a workshop several years ago that was basically on baby care, and it had a lot of information on cloth diapers and some information on using diaper services versus taking care of your own. I can look, if we didn't have a whole lot of questions on that, I can look back and see if I can find that information and see if it's any of it's still current.
Yeah, so it also, maybe the best way to do it then is if you have questions about, if you want to know a little bit more about cloth diapers, maybe send an email to ehouse@cityoftacoma.org, and we can send you more resources directly. And I'll put that in the chat. That's the right email address, right, Janda?
Right.
Great. All right. Well, it looks like almost everyone has taken the last closing poll. Thank you so much for giving your input and sharing it with us. And thank you so much, Christina. What a great presentation. I feel empowered to do more zero waste things again. It's definitely been challenging this last year, but I'm excited to try some new things.
Yeah, thank you again so much for having me, and thank you to everybody that came.
I thought that was a great one too, and I'm glad we're recording it. So if any of you want to see this again, to look at the resources, it will take us a few days to get it downloaded and then re-uploaded. But it will be on the websites that Kyla put out in the chat earlier. So we will get that information out. And thank you again.